Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this presentation on two more chapters of the book, Introduction to Spiritism. This is Luiz Lima. I am in Central Florida, and we'll be talking about classification of spirits and worlds. This is a very interesting topic, at least for me. There's a lot of details, a lot of interesting things that we are going to discuss today. So follow along. Let's go through it. There's a lot of information coming up. So, classification of spirits and worlds. One thing, before we can even talk about spirits, when we go to the Spirits book, which is the main source of content for Spiritism, there is a question. What are spirits? So Allan Kardec asks the highly evolved spirits, how can we define spirits? And the answer is very interesting. The answer that they gave us is the intelligent beings of creation. Okay, that opens the doors for two things. So what is creation? We need to put things into context, right? So what can we understand as creation? And what about these intelligent beings? What exactly, where do spirits, fall into this creation, intelligent beings? How is this all related? So before we can even go into talking about spirits, we need to put things in context. So we are going to start from the very beginning, following the teachings of the spirits by Allan Kardec, and we go to creation. Creation is a huge thing, of course. It all starts with God. From God, which is defined in Spiritism as the supreme intelligence and the first cause of all things. So from God, two things come out. One is called spiritual principle. This spiritual principle contains everything that one potentially is going to be intelligence and spirit. We're going to go through this in a little bit more details. And the other thing that emanates from God is what we call the universal cosmic fluid. The universal cosmic fluid contains the basic elements of everything that one day is going to be matter of any form. And this is called the material principle. So far, from God, we have two things: spiritual principle and universal cosmic fluid, which contains a material principle in it. The entire creation comes from the interaction of these two. The spiritual principle will interact with the material principle, and that's how creation starts, and creation is formed. Now, the spiritual principle, when it goes to I would say, interact with the material principle, it's a learning process. It has to go more and more and more. It keeps learning more, until there's a point that it becomes so much more intelligent that we call intelligent principle. So we go from, this is pure definition, what we are going to discuss makes sense later. So spiritual principle becomes intelligent principle after the spiritual principle learns how to infuse life in inorganic matter. When the spiritual principle gets so intelligent that it is able now to infuse life into organic matter, then it becomes what we call the intelligent principle. And this one continues its interaction with the material principle. Of course, now it's going to create much more advanced and intelligent things. So that's how the entire plants kingdom is born, animal kingdom, it all goes through here. Until a point that the intelligent principle becomes so intelligent, so more advanced, that we call it spirit. And the transition from intelligent principle to spirit happens when the intelligent principle became so intelligent that you will individualize and you will start generating individuals, and those are these spirits. So spirits are individualization of the intelligent principle. So right here, right now, what we're trying to do is contextualize where is the spirit within the creation to address the answer from the spirits. What are spirits? They are the intelligent beings of the creation. So what can we understand from here? Very interesting. On this side here, on the right side of your screen, as you see, the universal cosmic fluid and or the material principle, that's the object of study of science through its various ramifications and different sub-ramifications. So everything related to material principle is object of study of science. Anything else that you see here in green is object of study of Spiritism. Spiritism does not study what science studies. We use what they have found. We use their knowledge. The knowledge that science brings out, we use that to understand evolution of spirits and stuff like that. But we are not the ones studying. We don't go to a lab, to a laboratory to study matter, atoms, or anything like this. That's not us. We study the left side of the screen, per se, the green part, okay? So we study evolution of the spirit, not matter. Now, because of the spirit has to interact with matter, we need the knowledge that comes from science, okay? So if we divide this thing in two, so we have a left side here with the spiritual principle, intelligent principle, and spirit. Then we have a right side with a material principle. Think about this. There are different levels of intelligence. We just saw that the spiritual principle is a starting point, and it will go through, long process of being better and better and better. So there are different degrees of intelligence. So there are intelligence that are very simple, some are more advanced, others much more advanced. And there's an intelligence that is the more advanced of all. That one we call the supreme intelligence. That's seen by us, Spiritists. Science does not touch on the left side of your screen. Science is on the right side. So how does the science see these things? Science is based in cause and effect. Science looks for the truth, right? Academic science is looking for the truth. So when there's an observation, an event, we want to know how. We want to know the causes to that. When we find the causes to that, we want to know the cause of the cause. And then the cause of the cause of the cause, and it goes like that until we get to the very, very, very first cause of all things. So you see, if you look from the scientific point of view, you're looking for the first cause. If you're looking from the Spiritist point of view, you're looking for the supreme intelligence, but they are the same. That's the beauty of that definition of God. It's the supreme intelligence and the first cause of all things, because it satisfies both sides of the screen. It's a great explanation for us and for science. It's a beautiful thing. So we need to understand this, where the spirit falls in place here, so we can study it properly and use the correct vocabulary. So coming back to this here, everything that one day is going to be matter comes from the material principle. So there's a trinity here, which is God, spiritual principle, and material principle. Spiritual principle and material principle interact to form the creation. If you go a layer deeper, matter comes from the material principle. So there's another trinity here, which is called the universal trinity. It's in the Spirit's book, question 27, God, spirit, and matter. That's going to be an important piece of information to understand these chapters that we are going to discuss, 4 and 5 of the book, Introduction to Spiritism. So all of this is just to put things into context. So after this, a bunch of questions come up. Okay, And that's what the book is going to discuss. So I put some of the questions here. What is the origin of the spirits? Where is the nature of spirits? What is their form? Do they have a gender? How do they, move around? Is there such a thing as destiny? Do spirits evolve? Are they pre-existing to the body? And what happens after death? These are questions that we need to look into and discuss according to the book. So let's go one by one. Okay, first question. What is the origin of the spirits? We go back to our basic drawing, right? What is the origin of the spirits? We saw that the spirit comes from the intelligent principle. So the origin of the spirit is on the left side. There's nothing to do with the right side of your screen. Now, we Spiritists, we usually like to refer to spirits as immortal spirits. Like if we were putting emphasis on the word spirit, so we use immortal spirits. If you come to think of it, it's redundant, because mortal can only be a thing on the right side of the screen. Mortal depends on a form, a physical form that was transformed. That's when things die. Actually, they get transformed. So the spirit can never be mortal, because mortal is for matter, for molecules that bind from it, they're bind one way and then they're bind another way. So mortal is for material things. The spirit is not mortal because it doesn't depend on matter. So immortal spirit is almost like redundant. But a lot of times we Spiritists address like that. So the spirit is immortal. And what is the origin of these spirits? In answer to the question, right? They are individualizations of this intelligent principle. And even more, they are not all created at the same time, because they all come from the same origin, which is the spiritual principle, and this is being created all the time. So spirits are being created all the time. It's a never-ending process. There's no limit to this. So that takes care of question number one here. What is the origin of the spirits? Question number two. What is the nature of the spirits? Interesting, right? Well, I want you to think about something. Think about the conception. Okay, so conception, the two male and female protoplasms, they bind together, and the first cell is created at the time. So right now we have one cell. If we put this one cell into a powerful microscope, what do we see? Molecules. Then we take an even more powerful microscope and we look into this thing. We're going to see atoms. Then we go deeper. We look into, we find an even more powerful microscope and we put these atoms so we can see what's in it. And what do we find? Nothing. Just nothing, plain nothing. A microscope is not going to show anything, because it's just pure energy. You see, that's what we are, pure energy. It's not matter. It's not from the material, universal cosmic fluid, material principle. We do not come from there. We come from the other side of the screen, the left side of the screen. We come from the intelligent principle. So even science can find this, because subatomic levels are not seen by science. We don't have instruments to detect the spirits. And by the way, that's not the purpose of science. So what is the nature of these spirits? So first of all, they are incorporeal, meaning they don't have a body. Because if they had a body, they would be part of the material principle, and they are not. Number two, spirits are indivisible. Of course, for something to be divisible, so you can divide things, you have to have a form. You have to have matter, some sort of matter that you split in two. Spirits are not from, they do not come from the material principle, so they cannot be divided. And one interesting closing phrase in the book of Genesis by Allan Kardec, chapter 14, item 5, there is nothing truly spiritual except the soul or the intelligent principle. So, in other words, we could say everything that's not soul or intelligent principle is matter, nothing else. All right? That's the universal trinity: God, spirit, and matter. So, the nature of spirits, they come from the left side of the string, nothing to do with the material principle. What forms do spirits have? We go back to the same thing. When we talk about form, we are talking about a physical formation. Molecules, cells, atoms, whatever it is, we are talking about something that comes from the material principle. Spirits do not come from the material principle, so they cannot have a form. And by the way, if they don't have a form, you cannot kill them. They cannot be destroyed, right? That's why they are immortal, that we just saw, because there is no physical form. The spirit does not have a geometric form. They don't have any molecules binding to other molecules to form something. No, they do not. So what form do spirits have? They do not have a definite form as we know it. Nothing. Let's go for the next one. Question number 4. Do spirits have gender? Interesting question. We go back to the same thing. You see, all the roads lead to Rome, right? We go back to the same thing. Visually, this is for me at least, was a great tool for me to understand this thing. Do spirits have gender? Gender depends on a physical body. Gender depends on a biological body. If it depends on a biological body, it is something that has to do with the material principle. Spirits do not come from the material principle. So, when we talk about gender, male body, female body, that's not a spirit. Those are material formations. The spirit might form a masculine body now, then a feminine body later, but the spirit itself, as an energy or as an entity, does not have a gender. So gender, as we know, depends on the structure of the physical body. So they don't have a gender because they are not coming from the material principle. Let's go to another question, question number 5. How do spirits move around? That's interesting, right? So they don't have legs, right? How do they move around? Well, think about this. Think about a place that you have been, but not a place that you are every day. So some place that you have been. So I'm going to say Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Okay? So if you've been there, it's easier for you to think about the logic here. If not, just pick a place that you have been, a city that you have been, a place that you like. For you to go from here, from the east coast of the US to Rio de Janeiro, right? If you want to be there, you have to take a plane. You have to travel. So we are talking about several hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, depends on where you are. But we are talking about a real long trip. In order to be there, you have to go through all these things, right? Take the plane and all of that. Now, when you think about Rio de Janeiro, let's say you've been there, let's just say 2 years ago, and you're going to remember when you were there. For you to think about Rio de Janeiro, how long does it take you to get there? Right? Nothing. It's instantaneous, just like that. How can that be? because your legs are not going to take you there. What's going there is the intelligent part, the spirit goes there in memory, as we say, but it goes there. It doesn't have to physically go there. So you see, the thought is the speed that the spirits move around. They move around with the speed of a light, speed of thought. By the way, the speed of thought is over the speed of light. But that's how spirits move around. There is no, per se, transportation as we know it. It's instantaneous because there's no material barrier for that to happen. You see, spirits are just spirits. They are not coming from the material principle. Here's another question. What is the destiny of spirits? That's an interesting one. Allan Kardec and the spirits teach us that we are all born simple and ignorant, meaning we don't have knowledge of anything. We are just this starting point on our journey. And we go through a long journey, and we get to what we call the perfection. It's a relative perfection because full perfection or true perfection is only God. But we will get as close as possible to that. So there is a path, there is a development in there where we go from simple and ignorant, and there's a destination. The destination is perfection. And actually that brings us to question number 7. Do spirits evolve? Yes, of course they do. We just saw it here. They go from simple and ignorant to perfection. So all spirits will go towards the condition of pure spirits that we are going to discuss in a little bit. Pure spirits are spirits that made it to perfection, in which they will attain perfection and enjoy full happiness. So until we get there, we do not enjoy per se full happiness. Happiness becomes a relative thing. So do spirits evolve? Yes, of course. The whole creation evolves, okay? Because the intelligent principle evolves. Spirits are intelligent principles. Here's another question. Question number 8. Does the spirit pre-exist the body? We go back to the same thing. Oh my God, we're coming back to the same thing all the time. Right? The whole creation is about the intelligent principle operating or manipulating the material principle. A body is something material. Body belongs to the material principle side, which is your right side of your screen. In order for something material to be born, to be created, you need some intelligent principle to do that. You see, the body does not create the spirit. The body is created. By who? By the spirit. So the spirit has to be in place before the body. Otherwise, it cannot create anything. So does the spirit pre-exist the body? Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a body. The matter by itself cannot, molecules do not combine themselves randomly and form a body. It can't happen that way. It needs to be operated by an intelligent principle or spirit. So does it pre-exist the body? Yes. Spirits are cause, not effect. The body does not create the spirit. That would be, if that was the truth, the spirits would not be the cause but the effect. But no, the spirit, the intelligent principle, is the cause of things. Okay, here's another one. What happens after death? So we died, and what happens then? Well, that's a very interesting question because we have lengthy information from the spirits on this. Codification itself has a lot of information on it. So we are here for a certain lifetime, what we call an incarnation. At the end of this incarnation, we're going to discarnate, we're going to be in the spirit world, And we call this the wandering state. The wandering state means we are gonna evaluate what we did on the previous incarnation. We are gonna work on the things that need to be worked. We are gonna go over what we learned, go over what we did right and wrong, go analyze our choices, and plan for the next life based on the previous life. So what do I have to do to be better? I was there and I did this thing that wasn't right. How can I avoid being wrong again? That's the wandering state. And then we go to another life. After that life, we go back to wandering state. So it's an alternation of things: incarnation, wandering state, incarnation, wandering state, until we get to perfection. When we get to that point, we call pure spirits. We're going to explain that. When we get to that point, we no longer need to be incarnating, unless we choose it as a mission. But then we get away from the cycle of incarnation, wandering state, and so on, so on, so on. So what happens after death? We go into a wandering state. It's a state in which a spirit on the spiritual plane is, while awaiting a new incarnation in a physical world to which it is still connected. So the spirit is going to work on itself and plan for a next life based on a previous incarnation. So in order to explain all of this in more details, Allan Kardec proposes to the spirit something that he calls the Spiritist scale. So he says, he actually goes to the spirits and says, it's going to be easier for me to explain, as you are teaching me. He's talking to the spirits, right? As you are teaching me, it's going to be easier if I can categorize the spirits, create certain categories and give them names. And that would be based on moral advancement. So the spirits look at him and say, yeah, you can do it. You can call whatever names for these categories, and you can have as many categories as you want. However, the teachings that we are passing along have to be preserved. So that's exactly what he did. He created a Spiritist scale, which is based on the development degree of the spirits. So you're going to have, we saw in the beginning, we have different levels of intelligence. Some spirits are less advanced, some are a little bit more, some are really more advanced. So that is used to categorize the spirits based on moral evolvement. So Allan Kardec produces a scale, 10 categories. And you see here on the screen the names of these categories: impure, frivolous, false scholars, neutral, disruptive, benevolent, scholarly, wise, high order, and pure. And he goes a little further. What he says is, we are going to group these 10 categories. So he creates what he calls orders. So third order spirits, group the 5 less evolved categories. And he calls imperfect spirits. Then the next 4 that you see in green here, he calls the second order, or good spirits. And there's a first order with just 1 category, pure spirits. Those are the ones who achieve perfection. So when we look at this, the first question is, what's the difference between a third order spirit and a second order spirit? Well, let's look at that. Third order spirits, the ones in red here. First thing that we need to understand, there's predominance of matter over spirit. So they're still very connected to anything material. Right? Anything material matters more than anything spiritual. It's very hard for these spirits to devote time for spirit development. They are usually not doing this, very little. Most of what they do is concentrate on material things. There's a tremendous propensity to do evil things on that order. That order is dominated by pride, selfishness, ignorance, and so passions, all of those things, and very little knowledge and interest on spiritual matters. Most of the interest on that order is material. So those are the third order spirits. Second order spirits, or good spirits, contrary to the third order, in which matter dominates over spirit, here on the second order, there's predominance of the spirit over matter. So spiritual things are much more important than material things. So there's a tremendous emphasis on spiritual matters. Will to do good, contrary to the third order here, which is propensity to do evil things. On second order spirits, good spirits, will to do good. That's their motto. Let's do good. Correct understanding of God and infinity, meaning correct understanding and interest on spiritual things, right? No bad passions, but still subject to trials. So no bad passions, and bad passions are something really common on third order spirits. On good spirits, second order, there is no such a thing. They are much more elevated morally. They will not be involved in bad passions or anything like this. So we go from impure all the way on the left, which is the less advanced category, all the way to the right to the pure spirits, which are the more advanced ones. And we spoke about influence of matter and spirit. How does it work? Well, think about this, for example. On the far left, the impure spirits, first of all, if those spirits are incarnated, of course there's a spirit in there, and there's a physical body, living a material life mostly, as we saw. So for those on the very left, the influence they suffer from the spirit on their life is minimum. Most of the influence, almost 100%, is based on material things. As we go along, advancing to the right side of the screen towards the second order, it starts to change. The influence of matter declines and the influence of the spirit increases until you get to the far right, which is at the very far right of the second order spirits, good spirits, in which predominance of spirit is almost 100% and very, very, very little influence of matter. When they reach the boundary here for the second order spirits, they no longer have to incarnate. They become pure spirits, and I mentioned that before. They will only incarnate if they think it's worth it as a mission, if they want to take a mission. But that's how we can kind of understand the influence of matter and spirit. So far left spirits, influence of matter is tremendous. Far right spirits, influence of spirit is much higher. Okay, so these spirits on the far left, sometimes they get qualities that are not sometimes, their qualities are not very good. So for each of these categories, Allan Kardec in the book, Spirit's book, and also in Introduction to Spiritism, he will go at length for each one of these. We're just going to talk about some of them. We're not going to go through the whole thing because it's all in the book. Actually, I urge you to get the book, right? Introduction to Spiritism. So impure spirits, vicious, pleasure for evil things, and so forth. As you go along, it becomes less trouble. So frivolous, thoughtless, malicious, and then false knowledge with pride and vanity. And then neutral spirits are not necessarily good or bad, but they are not good enough to do good and not bad enough to do bad. They are kind of an inflection point. Disruptive, those are the ones producing or trying to produce physical effects and raps and noises and stuff like that. And then we go over to the second order spirits. So we start with the benevolent. They don't have full knowledge yet, but kindness is the driving force. They still have a lot to learn. But kindness is a driving force, something that on the left side here on the third order, we don't see, okay? Then the scholarly with great intellectual knowledge, not still fully developed in terms of morality, but intellectually, yes, they are very advanced. And then the next one, wise, they have moral qualities and intellectual capacity. So they acquired moral qualities also. And the higher spirits, they have full knowledge, science, wisdom, and goodness. From there on, they incarnate as a mission. So those are just some of the descriptions for each category. The Spirits book details a lot of these categories. There's a lot of information on it. And the Spiritist scale in the Spirits book starts on question 100. So we urge you to go there and look for all the details. The impure spirits receive different names outside Spiritism. So sometimes they are called demons, evil genii, evil spirits, evil deities. There are different names. So the idea of demons as, you know, a classic portrait of what a demon is not how we see it in Spiritism. These are just spirits that they still have a long way to go, but they will be perfect in one day. By the same token, on the right side of the screen, the pure spirits receive different names too. So sometimes they are called angels, archangels, seraphim. These are names that we see these names outside Spiritism as well, but they don't carry the same, I would say, meaning that we do in Spiritism. So that needs to be understood by us Spiritists. So when we read Spiritist literature, we know exactly what's being taught. Okay, so that defines the Spiritist scale. Now, these spirits, whatever they are in the scale, wherever they are, pure in the middle of the scale, towards the right side of the scale, they have to live somewhere. They have to carry over their lives. So they need places. They need places to, material places. They interact with matter, right? So they need worlds to carry on their purpose in life. So there is also a category of worlds. The Spiritist scale that we're going to put it here so we don't lose sight of it is defined by morality, moral advancement. The categories of worlds is based on the evolutionary level of their inhabitants. So, for example, impure spirits and frivolous, for example, left side of the scale, they have to live in a world that is kind of common ground for them. So we're not going to have a world with half being impure and half being, let's say, wise. No, that's not going to happen. We will have good spirits living in worlds for imperfect spirits here and there in very small quantities. However, the categories of worlds is based on the evolutionary level of their inhabitants in their 5 categories. As you see here, primitive, trials and atonements, regenerative, happy or joyful, heavenly, and divine. So, for example, impure, frivolous spirits, they are not going to be able to live on heavenly and divine worlds. They have to live under primitive worlds. Most of us here on earth, we belong to 3rd order, imperfect spirits. And the earth is one of the worlds, it's categorized right now as trials and atonements. So the world that we live in is a world of trials and atonements, which is still adequate for 3rd order spirits. Let's take a quick look of these worlds at some of the characteristics. Primitive worlds are for first incarnations. Those are spirits that are kind of, if you will, brand new. They just individualized from the intelligent principle. they will go to primitive worlds. Trials and atonements, like I said, that's where we are. Evil prevails due to their ignorance. We just saw that what makes a third water spirits, that's exactly what it is. So we need to go through all these trials and expiations in a world like ours. The next one is regenerative worlds. There is still trials, but no expiations. Expiations is something that we need to offset because of wrongdoings of the past. That does not happen on these worlds, but there are still trials. We still have to be tried. We still have to be tested for some things. The next world is happy or joyful. So here, good prevails. There is nothing bad. This is for good spirits. This is adequate for second order spirits. So good prevails. It's for highly evolved spirits. And for pure spirits, we have the heavenly and or divine worlds. These worlds house pure spirits. So there's a lot of information that we can extract from Introduction to Spiritism, chapters 4 and 5. That's what we see. I encourage you to actually get the book and read. And on the book itself, as you go through the chapters, you will see references to certain passages in the Codification Spirits book and other places. So yeah, follow those links. Go on and look at those things, because the way the book is presented and the way the logistics of creating each chapter is fantastic. So if we follow the recommendation, all these links into Spirit's book, we're going to have a very interesting overall piece of knowledge. So thank you very much. I hope you have liked what we discussed here. And once again, I'm Luiz Lima here in close to Orlando, Florida, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.